everyone, so today we're going to be designing the much anticipated garland swag. Well, not swag, garland. And this is going to be for fall today. We're going to do a Christmas version a little bit later on, but we're actually going to do the full length, the whole 9 feet of this garland. And I'm going to show you guys it above a door as well as on my fireplace. But I think it's going to turn out beautiful. So let's get started. We just have a 9-foot, relatively inexpensive garland. You can pick these up from Hobby Lobby. It's as basic as you can get. I do have a more premium version of it as well. I do have several of those, but you know, the twist ties are a little bit long and I don't want to see nearly as much pine in this design since it's for fall. We are going to cover it with some berries and some flowers and greenery, so I don't want to see too much of the pine. So what we're going to do first is we're going to open it and then kind of straighten it out and then add our deco mesh. So this specific garland is labeled as a Canadian pine garland. It's 9 feet long and it's from Nicole, which I believe is AC Moore's collection. But like I said, any garland will work. AC Moore unfortunately closed, but any basic garland will be more than enough. You don't have to break the bank with this one. So one of our first steps before adding any of our deco mesh is actually going to be fluffing our garland. So as you can see, it's a very poor quality garland. The only thing I really look for in, quality of garlands, especially for fall like this, is actually the wire thickness. So I want the wire to be relatively thick, and this one definitely is, just to support the entire garland without kind of drooping and being too lightweight. So all I'm doing to start off with is I'm just taking the pine tips and spacing them out, kind of pulling them, stretching them out, so it's a little bit easier for us to be adding our our deco mesh afterwards. And normally I'm not a huge fan of deco mesh, but the colors we're using today don't have any glitter or any tinsel, and they're a little bit more subdued, so I think it'll still look really beautiful with this. But once you go ahead throughout the entire garland, fluff it open, take any of the kinks out, and straighten out all the pine tips like this. Again, this is 9 feet, so it does take a few extra minutes. But once we do that, then we can come back in with some deco mesh. So I already did 3/4 of this garland, and now what we'll do is finish up the edge, just pulling them apart, not being too critical because we are going to cover most of it like that. So now our 9-foot garland is all fluffed out. We can begin working in some product. So we're going to start with some of this poly burlap mesh, and I believe this came from Craig Bachman when me and my dad took a trip to Frankfort, Illinois last year. But it's a 10-inch by 10-yard orange poly burlap, and I think this is going to match the flowers we're using today beautifully. So we're actually going to add this in using the ruffle technique, and then we can come back in afterwards with some curls. So with garlands, the most important thing, in my opinion, is making sure you work in one product at a time. So the reason we add one product in at a time is to make sure that A, we have enough, and B, we don't get too heavy on one side with a certain product and, not enough on the other side. So consistency is key when decorating garlands as well as Christmas trees. You guys know I feel the same way about decorating Christmas trees. So for this, we're not going to be doing 10-inch poofs like we typically would do with our wreaths. We're going to just create little bundles like this. So we are going to come back in with additional mesh, but I'm going to create about 5 to 6-inch poofs like that throughout the entire swag. And this is going to be the first product we work in. And I'm not going to do it in pieces. I don't like doing garlands or trees in pieces. I like doing it by either A, color, or B, product. And also don't worry too much about getting them perfect at this point. We are coming back in with more stuff which will kind of obscure this mesh anyway. This will just make our garland appear a little bit bulkier and a little bit thicker, which is definitely something that we want. And we can fluff it out afterwards. So one 10-yard roll should be just enough for this garland. I'm not thinking we need 2 rolls of this at all. But the thing is that this roll is actually pieced together. Look at that, you guys. I didn't even realize that, because it was so deep in the roll. So we'll just come back in and use the rest of the roll. So it's okay when things like that happen, whether it's your ribbon or your mesh. As understanding as you can be is the best way of kind of designing, because things happen, to all of us and to all of these companies, and they do have to piece things together. So we'll just finish up this last piece. I'll just kind of fold it over, tuck in any of the raw edges, and place it right here. Just like that. You're not even going to be able to tell in the end. Now we'll come back in with more, or the other end of our roll. And we got about 2.5 feet of our garland left. So the standard size for garlands is 9 feet. So keep that in mind. If you do it any smaller, you know, sometimes people might request something smaller. I don't do customs, but if I did, I know that some customers might want to do some smaller garlands for, you know, maybe a corner of a fireplace or a corner of a door or something. And you totally can do that. You can just cut your garland right in half or into a third and design with it that way. So here's going to be our final poof, and we're actually going to cut it off before placing it. So I'll place one final piece here, and then what we'll do is we'll cut it off. So we'll just cut it off about 10 inches away from the garland. Take our final piece and place it back into the garland so that we have a nice little poof on the edge. So here's how the garland looks so far. Very clumpy and kind of ugly at this stage, but you know, everything starts off ugly and then turns out beautiful near the end. So let's work in some more deco mesh. So now we're going to come back in with two more types of mesh, another poly burlap mesh, and we're also going to work in this value mesh. So this one's the most inexpensive at about $2.50 a roll, and the item number for this is RE800201, and this is actually just a leftover roll that we've used in another tutorial in the group. So always save your leftovers. We end up using them, you know, whether it's the next project or a few projects later, but I always make sure to get as much use out of them as possible. So I'm going to cut these pieces about 15 to 18 inches in length, and we're going to add these in using the curl technique throughout the entire garland. So we'll be doing one of the burlaps to start off with, and I'm just going to curl them up like this. Since it's a partial roll, it curls up very nicely, and we're just going to take them and place them periodically throughout. So I'm not going to really focus too much on my placement. I'm more focused on, with these garlands, kind of the uniformity in width. So if it kind of looks uneven like this, kind of a bare spot, that's what I really look for. But we're going to start by working in some of these. So we do have a partial roll, so we do want to be kind of considerate with how much we add. That way we don't run out. So it's always a good idea to either test it beforehand if you're unsure, if you're nervous, or what you can also do is also just kind of see how many you have in total and, you know, divide that by 9 feet. And that'll kind of give you a general idea as to how far to space them. So just rolling them up and placing them throughout. So the reason we're adding poly burlap or poly jute like this, so the only reason we're really adding any mesh into this design at all is to cover up our inexpensive frame. So of course we can just use strictly florals and greenery and have an absolutely stellar design, but it's a little bit more economical working in mesh as opposed to greenery. Here I just have the very end of the roll, which is kind of more narrow, which we'll just tuck in right here. Place another piece right here, and just continue working in more. So it looks like we have a total of 4 or 5 pieces left, so we do want to make sure that we space them out a good amount. We do have another mesh to work in, our value mesh, and it matches this really nicely, so if you're 1 or 2 pieces short, you're really not going to notice. Okay, so now our final 3 pieces of this mesh. And our very final piece of this mesh, we'll just place right here. So now let's do the same thing with the other version of this brown mesh, just the value mesh. So now it's time to work in our value mesh, and this is again 10 inch by 10 yard, about $2.50 a roll. And as you can see, it matches that mesh more absolutely beautifully, but this mesh is kind of a better texture, being kind of like a fabric or burlap. So different textures is really going to highlight our design. So let's break down these pieces between, let's say, 16 and 18 inches and work them throughout like we just did. So now I've cut the entire roll of this, and now we'll do the same process where we're going to pinch in the middle and simply just place where we could use an extra piece of mesh or two. So not only does this fill in your design a little bit more, it takes away a little bit more of the pine, and I don't want to see too much of that pine in the end. And if a little bit of it's showing, that's totally fine, you guys. Don't stress, don't fret. It'll still turn out just beautiful, and we can always cover it up if too much of it's showing with some greenery or some flowers. And we still have enough for maybe about 7 or 8 more pieces of the orange, so we may come back in with that and do the same technique that we're doing now, the curl technique. Who knows? I'm not sure if I want to save that roll since I don't think we're going to be doing any more fall after this, but who knows? We could always save it if need be. Okay, so we're about halfway there, so now let's finish up the rest of the roll of the basic deco mesh. So the pieces we've already worked in so far was towards the end of the roll. So now we're getting towards the surface of the roll, which just means we need to curl them up a little bit tighter. I don't want super massive curls on this design. I want them to be a little bit tighter. So for the first half of the roll, that's usually what you have to do, is kind of work it a little bit more. And we have 5 pieces left that we can place inside. Okay, so we have one final piece left, and I'm just going to place it here because it's looking a little sparse. So if you do ever have any leftovers, make sure to hang up your garland or give it a good inspection to see if you're missing any spots. Like I said, the main thing I really look for with garlands is kind of the uniformity all the way around, rather than having everything kind of dispersed within. So this is usually where I look, the first thing I look at a garland is just the outside edges. Okay, so I did cut the remaining roll of the orange. There was only 7 pieces, you guys. We're not going to get, incredible coverage. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pepper them throughout just to fill in a little bit more. So if there's any gaps, doesn't matter where, just place an extra piece or 2. And since it's the end of the roll, it has a nice curl to it. And we've got 2 pieces left. And our final one we'll just place on the end. So these are kind of insignificant, but I didn't want to save that roll, so might as well just place them inside. So now, you guys, is the most fun part, which is going to be actually decorating it with flowers, maybe some ribbon, some greenery, and other embellishments. So we're going to start off with some of our filler flowers. So I have 7 of these bushes. I don't know how many of each. I think 5 of the white and then 2 of the white and the orange. It doesn't matter which one you choose. They both look pretty much the same. I didn't even notice that they were different until I just picked them up a minute ago. But the item number for these, the white ones, is 632663. It was $4.99, 40% off. And the item number for the orange is 632660. So we have 7 of them, and we have a 9-foot garland. So for every one spray, we're going to try to space it out about maybe 1.25 feet worth of coverage. That way we have enough and it's dispersed evenly, because I don't want to have too much to start off with and then it slowly gradually tapers off and gets thinner and thinner. You want it to be consistent throughout. So let's break down one at a time and work them in. So we'll start off by placing them going towards the right hand side on one end, and then somewhere in the middle is where we're going to meet, and then kind of do a crossover where we're going to start working things in a different direction, because I don't want them all going in the same motion. But you might be wondering, why the heck is he working with his filler flowers to start off with? And, there really is no rhyme or reason for it. I usually just choose what I want to work with first. That's usually how I go about it. But we do have some large, beautiful cream, off-white sunflowers we're going to be adding, as well as some berries. But I'm going to start with the filler flowers first. That way we can do as much coverage as possible and cover up as much of our mesh. The mesh is beautiful, but it's not going to be our main focus. It's just going to be used as a base. So that's where one spray goes in, and we got over 1.25 feet. This is about almost 2 feet worth of coverage, so we should definitely have enough through the use of 7 sprays. $4.99 each, 40% off, so $2.99. And, you know, Yaya also used her 10% off senior citizen discount, so if you are a senior citizen, definitely take advantage of that because you can save yourself some money. So let's work in our second spray. And you know what? We didn't even finish that piece. I still have one additional stem left, so great coverage for the price. So I've broken down the orange spray now, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to, you know, kind of pepper them in. You're not really going to be able to tell where we're going to place the orange ones. I'm not going to cut them all in advance and then disperse them. We're going to show you guys how much coverage one spray gets. So now we'll just layer our next piece, which is going to be our oranges. And again, I don't know how many sprays exactly I have of that. So also another good reason to use mesh in your garlands, even though I'm not the world's biggest fan of mesh, but another good reason for using it is because you have great surface contact to be able to stick your stems in and have them secure to your garland. If you were just using your garland, you'd have to be a little bit more particular with your placement of your floral stems. That way they don't fall off, but with the mesh, it's acting as a great base to hold everything. So we have some pieces shooting towards the left, some pieces shooting towards the right, and that's exactly what we want, you guys. We don't need perfect coverage, we don't need perfect placement. As long as you're somewhat worked in towards the right-hand side, you're good to go. Place another piece there, and that's our second spray. So we got about 3 feet down, maybe a little bit more, worth of 2 sprays. Now we'll just come back in with our white spray now. So I just broke down our third spray, which is just a solid white, or ivory. And we'll just continue with this motion. So right here is going to be our 4.5 foot mark, which is going to divide our garland exactly in half from the 9 feet. So from here on, we're going to start having our greenery worked in this motion. So our final few pieces off this our third bush, we're going to kind of have sticking, you know, completely straight up and down. But we don't need to lengthen it, so we don't want to have kind of like a mound here. We want it to still be perfectly symmetrical. And now everything can go in the opposite direction. So there goes our third spray, and we're exactly halfway there. So we have a total of 7 sprays. Let's break down another orange one and start working it in the opposite direction. So I've broken down our orange spray, and we can start peppering them in. So as I said before, for a design like this, a garland, I'd much rather work in our filler flowers to start off with. I'm not worried about covering them up after. I'm totally okay with kind of losing a few flowers hidden underneath our sunflowers. But I definitely wanted to add this first, just to have some greenery and a nice base of flowers to come back in with some of our more stately ones. Because with these, it's very hard to go wrong with your placement since they're so, you know, thin. You don't see too much of a bulky looking feel to it, but with our larger flowers, if we don't space them a little bit more purposefully, what ends up happening is they kind of look clumpy and awkward. So that's our fourth spray of the orange. We'll come back in with another white and finish off our garland. Just coming back in with more white flowers now. So as you can see, you can't really tell the distinct difference between the orange ones and the white ones just because they're so dainty and definitely a filler flower. So for every piece I place on one side, I just come back in and place another piece on the opposite side. Okay, so let's cut down one more spray and finish up our garland. And these pieces look like they're shooting straight up, but that's just because the garland's folded at a 90-degree angle over my table. So the flowers should be kind of more compressed and not shooting straight out like that. And our final 2 flowers. So I have one spray of this left that we'll use as a filler after we add some of our larger sunflowers. So up next we have these beautiful sunflowers, and these came from Michael's at $12.99, 40 off plus an additional 10, with an item number of 631425. So I have two of these specific sprays, but I also have another version of this color sunflower, but a little bit larger. So we're going to work in two of these to start off with. Since we have two, we got to space each bush 4.5 feet. So we got to stretch all of these flowers for 4.5 feet, and we should be able to do so. But we're also going to be adding the larger sunflowers as well as some berries later on. So let's begin working them in. So to start off with, we're going to work them in the same direction as the pre-existing florals, so towards the right-hand side, and then once we meet in the middle, we'll have them facing in a different direction. But I'm going to space these out a decent amount to start off with, every 4 or 5 inches, just to make sure that we have enough and that we're not short. So for every one piece I place towards the inside, I'm coming back in with another piece towards the outside, just like that. Place another piece towards the inside, and just continue alternating. Definitely do that step-like motion. It definitely enhances your designs. So at this point in time, we actually haven't added any ribbon, and I'm still unsure if I want to add ribbon to this design. That's something we can figure out a little bit later on. It's never too late to tuck in a little bit of ribbon. But as you guys know by now, I love ribbon. We can make beautiful bows. It's just I don't feel it's necessary in every single design. And if we can get away without using ribbon, sometimes it's nicer that way. So here's the midway point. So we're just going to start working our flowers in different directions. So we have one flower left. So here's our final flower. And we'll start working them in a different direction. We also have 3 leaves that we can add in if need be. Just to add a little bit more greenery. But let's work in our second bush of these sunflowers. Alright, so we've just cutting down our second spray, or second bush rather, and we're going to work them in the opposite direction. So these few are kind of spewing out either way, and now we're going to start with that motion. So we have about 3 feet left of our garland to work in some flowers. So most important thing in my opinion, or the first thing that I do with my garlands, is always work in one product at a time. So as you guys can see, it makes it easier to disperse them evenly, make sure the colors are balanced, and make sure you don't have too much on one side and not enough on the other. So let's say we took a break and we did half the design, and then we came back to finish the rest. Who knows if our hands got a little bit heavier with adding products by then. So work in one product at a time and then, switch over to the next, because you don't want to get, too heavy-handed with a certain element and then not have enough, or, kind of disperse it a little less throughout. Okay, and that's all of our sunflowers. We just placed one piece directly in the middle, kind of finishing off our end. So now it's time to come back in with some of the greenery that's left over from these flowers, or some berries. So let's work in these stunning little berries, and these are just an orange berry that came from Michael's. I purchased 4 sprays, we might not use all 4, with an item number of 629580, and they were $9.99 each, 40 off plus an additional 10. It might be a little bit more economical to purchase them from a store like At Home, because they do sell them for, I believe, $2.99 for almost the same amount, maybe half of it. But we're going to just be using the solid orange today. My main focus with placement of this is to cover up as much of the mesh as possible, so that's really where we're going to be placing them. We don't want them to be protruding too far out, because we still want to maintain that perfect look. So I broke down one spray by cutting off each individual stem, and then cutting them in half. So we get double the amount of stems that you see, because we are breaking them in half. So I did that to one spray. Let's work that in and see how far we get. And if need be, we can work in more. So if you see too much of the mesh, just place a piece or two of these berries there. So I still have the other spray of the white sunflowers, but I'm not sure if we need them for this project. So for garlands, I like to make them nice and full and beautiful, but if we can get away without having to use a product and save a little bit of money, I always like to do that. Makes the garlands a little bit more inexpensive for your customers to purchase, not having to add so many different products. So for every piece you see me placing on the inside, we're also going to place one up top as well. So one of the biggest downsides for designing a garland is simply just the size of it. You know, you're having to add significant product, make sure that it's nice and full, and it's kind of awkward or irregular to work with because it's so long. And already you guys know that we don't work with a whole lot of garlands. It's always fun to do one, but this is not usually something that I often do a whole lot of. But once we do them, you know, I always regret not doing more because they do turn out so beautiful. So that's the entire spray of the berries. Let's work in a second spray and do a little bit more coverage for the other half of our swag. Actually, we only have about another 3.5 feet. So let's add the rest of our second spray now. Doing the same exact motion, however, at this point in time now we're working them in opposite directions. So when you advertise garlands, you don't have to advertise it just around a door. You can also have this as a table garland. If you have a 9-foot table, most tables are about 6 feet, I believe, but you can have it displayed on your table if you want to do 6-foot lengths for, you know, table centerpieces. You can have this displayed on your fireplace mantle. You can have it going up and down your stairs. There's so many different ways to advertise for this, and I do recommend taking pictures in different various points in your house. Because from a customer standpoint, when they see it displayed on a door, you know, it's kind of hard for them to envision other locations. You know, that's why we're all designers in this group, because we all have a designer's eye, and it gives us the ability to kind of think of things outside of the box and have things work in different locations, whereas a lot of people kind of get stuck on just the placement where you have it. So that's our final berry spray, and I think that's more than enough. So now we can decide if we want to add any ribbon, or if we want to add those larger sunflowers, or any other final embellishments. So here's how it turned out. So I decided against adding any more product. I don't think it was necessary. So here I just have it displayed against my white background, and I also have it displayed on my fireplace. So I'll come back in and I'll post a picture of it being displayed on my door, but it has been rainy over the last couple of days, so this is the best I can do. But definitely give it a shot. You know, you can be surprised as to what you can create with the garland. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye, everyone.